Today, we're diving into a really provocative idea. What if there's a hidden pattern, a single number that keeps showing up that might just be the fundamental unit of information for our entire universe, almost like a source code for reality itself? And it all kicks off with this one simple question. Why on earth does the number 64 seem to pop up in so many different, completely unconnected places? I mean, is it just one big coincidence, or could it be a clue pointing to something way, way deeper? Let's just look at some of the examples. Okay, first, let's go right to the core of biology. Our DNA is literally written in a language of three-letter words we call codons. And get this, there are exactly 64 possible combinations. Not 63, not 65, 64. That's the complete alphabet for all life on Earth. Now, let's jump from biology straight into technology. The computer or phone you're watching this on right now, yeah, it almost certainly runs on a 64-bit processor. That means it crunches information in chunks of 64 ones and zeros. It's the native language, the register size, for our entire modern digital world. And this pattern isn't just new. I mean, look at something as ancient as the I Ching, the Chinese Book of Changes. It's this incredibly complex system that maps out the whole spectrum of human situations and archetypes into, you guessed it, 64 distinct hexagrams. And finally, something super familiar, the chessboard, a perfect 8x8 grid, creating this perfect tactical battlefield of 64 squares. So you've got genetics, computing, ancient philosophy, even our games. This number is everywhere. And at some point, you just have to ask, what is going on? That very question, what is going on, is what brings us to the core hypothesis we're looking at today, the 64 theory. So what is it? Well, the 64 theory basically says this is not a coincidence. It's a feature. It suggests that reality itself might be built on a fundamental unit, a kind of register that can hold 64 distinct states. You know, think of it like a light switch that isn't just on or off, but has 64 different settings. The theory argues that this is the minimum number of states you need to create a complete, stable alphabet for any complex system, whether it's life, a computer, or even the fabric of the universe. Now, before we go any deeper down this rabbit hole, it's really important to frame this using the author's own words. This is being presented as a provocative, evidence-informed hypothesis. It is not established physics. It's not here to replace the standard model or anything like that. Think of it as a working model, a new lens designed to connect patterns and ask some really interesting questions. All right, with that disclaimer in mind, let's get into the fun part. How does this theory actually suggest the universe is built? It proposes this really cool three-layer geometric architecture for reality, starting at the absolute smallest scale possible. Okay, layer one is the container, the scaffolding of space. The idea here is that at the tiniest, most fundamental level you can possibly imagine, we're talking the Planck scale, the vacuum of space isn't smooth, it's structured into these little, discrete units. And each one of these units is a 64-part register made up of 64 tetrahedrons. This is the basic grid of reality. So we have the container. What fills it? This is where it gets really interesting. Layer 2 proposes that energy isn't just some abstract value, it's geometric. It models the basic quanta of energy as literal, physical, equilateral triangles at the Planck scale. More area equals more energy. So you have the sea of geometric energy filling the vacuum. And this is how you get form, how you get structure out of that sea of energy. Layer 3 is the code. You can think of it as a rendering engine. It suggests that right triangles, with their famous a squared plus b squared equals c squared relationship, act as a universal set of rules. They overlay that grid of equilateral energy and basically tell it how to organize and stabilize into the complex fractal patterns we see everywhere in nature. And this image just puts it all together beautifully. You can see it right there. You've got layer 1, that 64-part vacuum scaffold on the outside. Inside it, you have layer 2, that sea of equilateral triangle-shaped energy. And then, giving it all its final form, is layer 3, the right triangle code, or metric, that lays over the top. The container, the contents, and the code. Okay, so that's the proposed static structure of reality. But, our experience isn't static, it's dynamic, it's alive. So how does this geometric model actually come to life? Well, the answer the theory puts forward is standing waves. Think of Nikola Tesla's work, or even the naturally occurring Schumann resonances that constantly vibrate in the Earth's atmosphere. The idea is that these 64-part registers act like tiny little resonant cavities, and only certain wave patterns, or modes, can exist stably inside them. That's what animates the geometry. And now we get to the most speculative, but maybe the most fascinating part of the entire model. What if a timeline, our experience of reality unfolding, is simply one of these stable standing wave modes? And what if consciousness itself is the chooser, the observer that selects which of the countless possible wave patterns to lock onto and actually experience as solid reality? This diagram shows that exact concept in action. The theory's author, Umair Abbas Siddiqui, boils the entire model down to this single powerful sentence. This is the whole concept in a nutshell, right here. So now let's look at how this model makes its most audacious and, really importantly, its most testable claim, that this geometric code doesn't just work at the tiny Planck scale, but that it scales up to govern the structure of everything, from atoms to entire galaxies. The theory proposes a kind of mathematical engine for this scaling, and it calls it the Pythagorean generator cascade. If you look at this table, you can see how simple whole numbers for n generate these classic right triangles, like the 3, 4, 5 triangle. The model then claims to directly link the angle of that triangle to the spiral pitch angle of a specific type of galaxy, and even its chemical makeup, like how much gas it has. There are no free parameters, no fudging the numbers. It's just pure geometry. And this leads to what the author calls the smoking gun. The theory predicts a very specific relationship between a galaxy's gas content and its shape, dictated by that triangle code. Well, when that prediction is mapped against actual galactic data, the author reports a Pearson correlation of -0.936. Now, just for context, a correlation of -1 is a perfect inverse relationship. A value of -0.936 is an incredibly strong and, frankly, a pretty startling statistical claim. This all sounds pretty grand, right? Which, of course, brings us to the most important question of all. How could we ever really know if this is true? Is this just a really cool, compelling model, or could it actually reflect reality? And this is where the theory gets its feet back on the ground and becomes real science. The author proposes a concrete 4-step program to actually test it, or, more importantly, to try and break it. The hypothesis is simple. If the universe is really built on a right triangle code, then we should see the specific angles from that code pop up everywhere things branch and split. In the veins of a leaf, the forks of a river, even the connections between our neurons. We can go out, measure those angles, and see if the predicted patterns are really there or not. So, to wrap this all up, let's just be crystal clear about what this is. The author presents it as a working model, a tool for recognizing hidden patterns, and most importantly, a testable hypothesis. What it is not being presented as is established physics or some kind of replacement for very successful theories we already have. It's really framed as an invitation to look at the universe through a new, deeply geometric lens. And that leaves us with one last big thought to chew on. It really all comes down to this one question. If our reality does operate on some kind of fundamental source code, are we just now, through these weird recurring patterns like the number 64, finally beginning to notice the syntax?